The first is a real direct job creation program by the federal government, where the federal government creates gainful employment for people. And I do think in terms of not just job quantity, but job quality. So these jobs have to be adequately remunerative. And the other is a subsidized model where the government subsidizes employers to hire workers, sometimes to the tune of 80 or 90%. That is, the government would pick up 80 or 90% of the wage for some fixed amount of time. I know a lot more about the second one because we did something like that during the Recovery Act when I was working for the Obama administration. But those are the two broad models. One is where the government directly creates job almost in the spirit of the New Deal, and the other is more of a subsidized employment model.
So if we were to pursue a jobs guarantee program, do you have any sense what sort of timeline this would be on? Is this something that we're talking about, I mean, with the big caveat that who knows what will be happening with the federal government over the next few years, but is this something that seems achievable in the relatively short term, or is this more of a longer term, something 10, 20 plus years from now?
With a rational, functional government, at least the subsidized employment idea could be ramped up quickly. And interestingly, this is not very well known, there are a number of programs like that in place already. There's the VISTA Jobs Program, there's a number of youth employment programs. These are all very small programs. But again, during the Recovery Act, so in 2009, we quickly ramped up a subsidized employment program. It was under the aegis of the TANF program, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. And there was something like maybe under $2 billion, I think I have that right, that was assigned to a program wherein states, it was actually more of a kind of a flow of resources than a program, but basically we said to states, you can use this money, which we're ramping up for TANF because we're in this really deep recession, you can use this money to subsidize employment for low-wage people who are facing labor market barriers, can't get into the job market. You have to be careful not to displace somebody else, so you can't go to an employer can't say, oh, well, Zoe, you're fired, but Ricky, you're hired. So you have to be careful to avoid this. You know, there are ways in which you have to craft this thing to make it most effective. But we found that during the Recovery Act, this program created over 250,000 jobs in a bunch of different states, subsidizing employment, again, often to the tune of 70, 80, 90%, sometimes for 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year. And after the subsidized employment ended, as it did, it was a time-limited program, a number of those workers were able to stay on into the labor market. So it was kind of clear. It looked like in some cases the program helped them get over a labor market barrier that was blocking them.
So during the Intelligence Squared debate, you raised several concerns about universal basic income as a policy to pursue. For those who weren't able to watch the debate, could you share with us what your main concerns on that front are?
Yeah, I would say my main concern comes from the proposal by Charles Murray, who was one of my opponents in that debate. So he was on the other side. And he's arguing for a form of UBI that I am absolutely sure would significantly worsen and deepen poverty and economic insecurity. What Murray wants to do, and I'm not telling tales out of school here because I've debated him numerous times on this, so sometimes it's not fair to argue with somebody who's not there to defend themselves, but Charles knows exactly where I'm coming from here. He wants to essentially take all of the resources that we're devoting to both the safety net and to some of our social insurance programs, Social Security, Medicare, and divvy them up per capita across the whole population. So make it a universal basic income paid for by aggregating all the resources we're currently spending on the safety net and social welfare program and social insurance programs. And obviously the arithmetic is quite simple because you're going to be really seriously diluting the resources that you give that are already targeted, and pretty well targeted, I argued in that debate, at folks in the bottom half, the bottom third of the income scale. So if you take resources that are well-focused, well-targeted, and as I argued that night, having their intended effect and pretty effective, and you give them to 300